We have a treat today. We don't always get French Hill to be our speaker for the whole program. We have to kind of get on his calendar and make sure that he's available, and we appreciate it when he can be here because he is one of our most dynamic speakers. And those of you who have been to programs that he's done before, you always ask for him to come back. So we brought him back. For those of you who don't know French that well, he is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Delta Trust. But prior to his banking career, he served as a senior official in the George H.W. Bush administration and was actually the executive secretary to the President's Economic Policy Council. So he's very, very, very astute when it comes to economic issues and finance. So you'll have a treat today. I won't go through everything he's done. It would take us all day to tell you all about him, but we're proud of him and we're glad to have him here. French, you want to come on up?
Well, of course, I'm a lot happier to be in Little Rock instead of Washington, D.C. today. Certainly a interesting week. This is the, I guess, the 18th government shutdown since about 1980. They all look and feel pretty much the same way, and they all end in typically the same way, which is nothing very definitive. They just move on, move the problem down the road, which is a shame, particularly for everybody who's under 40. You don't get any resolution to it. Today, though, it's going to be, I want to talk about a topic that I have not done before this group before, and this is striking horror, in the employees' hearts as they hear me utter those words, because they haven't seen this one before. But I thought you'd be interested to talk about how family dynamics affect family finance in estate planning. And maybe I'll try to go through the material fairly quickly, and then maybe we can have some discussion about that. Typically, and what we like, for those of you who are first-timers here, is we like to do case studies. One of our great members of our Women's Advisory Council over the years, Mary Haley, almost a decade ago now, suggested that we use this case study format, and it fit with my personality of not liking canned investment presentations on PowerPoint, where you pretty much can get that anywhere from any company, and you can go online and do it yourself. And so I hope you'll come back, because we really do have powerful case studies that we've done in the past, and Counselor Dee Davenport being one of the best presenters in that topic. But today we're going to talk about some things about estate planning. We did form our company back in 1999, and the purpose was to be a unique community bank. Sure, there are a lot of banks out in the country, both in Arkansas as well as around the nation, but we had a specific mission when we formed Delta Trust in mind, which was to be a place for businesses and families to bank if they had a need for trust, investment, insurance, and some of these very specific financial strategies, in addition to core banking like loans and deposits. And for me, speaking as the CEO of the company, I've been particularly pleased when the Women's Advisory Council was formed, again, a long time ago. I'm going to say, Jane Rogers, in 03 maybe, or 02? I mean, it was shortly after we formed the business. They have been so instrumental to us guiding what products that we offer in our communities, how we offer them, and with a particular emphasis on how to communicate to a female audience at all stages of life's journey. And that's really why we call this series that we've been doing now for almost 5 years, Your Financial Journey, because it really is a long continuum. So estate planning, what does that mean to you? I'll take a few comments from the floor to make sure everybody's awake.
Last will and testament.
Last will and testament, yeah, that's a good one.
Avoiding taxes.
Avoiding taxes, that's a good one. That's a good one. Anybody else?
Planning how you want your assets to be distributed after you die.
Right, yeah, so those are kind of, I think, three of the best descriptions of estate planning. And today I want to take a little deeper dive in it, because the number one answer that I usually get when I ask that question is, avoiding taxes, because that gets a lot of press out there in the country. The death tax, everybody's familiar with the death tax, the federal death tax, and then some states have a death tax on top of the federal death tax. You get to die twice in that state. If you hadn't already died of a heart attack just from doing the estate plan. But I want to focus on this issue of how you are planning for all of your assets to go forward into another generation. And that's what estate planning really is revolved around, the generations and how you think about those. And I like a tree as an example of that. And that's, trees take a long time to grow, and that's really what estate planning is about. You've got some examples of trees that you could plant on your property, and you would find that you'd never get to see them. They just would be a tiny sapling, but your children would see them, and that's really what matters. And when you think about doing an estate plan, that's the direction that you have to take, in my view. Frequently, the copper beech is a famous tree up in the Northeast. It's a big, beautiful tree in the fall, particularly. But it takes 40 years to just reach general maturity. So 2 generations. And then everyone who's traveled in the West knows about the sequoia or the bristlecone pine tree, trees that are as old as Christianity. So that's an old tree. And that's, if you plant one of those, you're not planning to see very much of it. So shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations is a proverb that is frequently thrown around. It was actually a quote from Andrew Carnegie. And Andrew Carnegie, of course, founder of Carnegie Steel and Carnegie Mellon University, and a lot of what Pittsburgh has is centered around Carnegie's legacy. And he was a big believer in and set up the largest foundation really of the late 19th and early 20th century that put libraries in every town across America. And he felt like that was the way that he could make a lasting difference. But one thing that always struck me is that why is it that in 3 generations a family or a family business is back to working for somebody else? If they've been so successful that they were an immigrant in our country or they started a business and that they did well and their children do well, but when it comes to that 3rd generation, it's back to shirt sleeves. And of course, it's an old feeling. You can go back to the Bible and find quotes that relate to it as well. So part of estate planning is to avoid that. And I don't think people consider that. I think they're considering, how do I save on my taxes? How do I get a clean last will and testament and move on? Because what happens next is not my problem. And you can take an opposite point of view, which is a very paternalistic point of view, and meddle generations later through what you write down in an estate plan as well. So this is about that balance. How do you want the best for your family? What are the strategies that you have to do that? I'd also argue that it is a little less about taxes for a bigger portion of our society because of the Congress's compromise on the tax bill last December, that for a husband and wife, basically sheltering $10 million inflation adjusted in long-term estate planning. That's a big difference to a lot of small family-owned businesses and has really been a help. And so now you even have to emphasize the points I want to make more, which is it is about taxes, it is about financial asset distribution, but it's also about the health of the whole family going forward several generations. So a family can successfully preserve and enhance their wealth for at least 4 generations using, I think, a set of common sense planning goals, both financially and elsewhere, and I'll go over that. Of course, the Rothschilds started their banking business in Europe, and they had 6 sons, and they scattered those sons in 6 different cities. And every one of them was given a specific amount of money and monitored from Dad's office. And as a result, all of them did well, and they were monitored closely, but they were all off doing their own thing. And so one theme I'm going to have today is that your kids need to be able to go off and do their own thing. They don't need to be strapped to whatever your mission was or your dad's mission. Closer to home, I think the Murphy Foundation and the Murphy family is a good example right here in Arkansas. Charles's dad started that business. Junior ran it. He died about 10 years ago. And of course, Murphy Oil is a well-known publicly traded company. But Madison Murphy, who's a little younger than I am and a good friend of mine, his kids have gone off and started their own business. All 3 of them are in business together in California. And they have, nothing to do with the core asset of the Murphys, which is Murphy Oil, and now Murphy USA, which is the gas stations at Walmart, which is spun out into a separate publicly traded company, and Deltic Timber, which is a separate spin of their timber operation. And I think that's fascinating. But what will make that successful is that they had, again, these non-financial roots that we'll talk about for building that generation tree. And those are, when you're doing your estate planning, true estate planning addresses all 3 of these things: human capital, intellectual capital, and financial capital. All of them are part of your family's wealth, and all 3 of these, we spend time when we are consulting with our families, we talk about them. In each one of the 3, you want to take the longest time frame that you can. And I think we are very short-term oriented in our country. We want to just plan for our retirement, or just plan to avoid the taxes at our death, and are a little ambivalent about our children's tax situation or their children's tax situation. In other words, the generation skipping trust idea, which minimizes the tax that your generation passes that on to your kids, just deals with one aspect of that. And therefore, if you take more of a 50-year outlook, or basically 2 generations on each of these topics, it'll really help you think through how to do your financial planning. Human capital in your family is your family's, and it's the family members' character, their virtue, their outlook on life. And here you've got a major investment to make with your children and grandchildren, which is stories about your family, the genealogy of your family, the history of a family business if you're engaged and continue to be engaged in a family business, and obtain their buy-in essentially on that multi-generational approach to being successful in whatever profession that you have. So if it's a family business and you want to maintain that, that's one direction. But the other is that you want people of high character in your family, and you want them to pass that on to their families in the future. And you do that through your outlook on life, your example that you set of high character, and how you communicate family life to them. And I urge people to make an investment in that. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Intellectual capital is truly what you think it is. How well educated are you? How well educated are your kids? How well educated are your grandchildren? And that is not an area to scrimp on. So this gets back to spending money now for a long-term gain, which is what, a successful investment is in anything. And then finally, financial capital, where all the attention is. It's like 80% of the time we're wandering around talking about, with your tax lawyer, how we're going to trick the federal government. And we don't pay any attention to these other 2 activities. So we'll talk more about financial capital. But first of all, I have to illustrate these with a few, quotes, of course. So since we're talking about thrift and high character, we have to talk about Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin, if you've read his autobiography, you know he was a person of high character. At least he talked about being of high character, but he was a mischievous guy as an adolescent, as a young adult, and certainly as an old man hanging out in the salons of Paris. But wish not so much to live long as to live well, poor Richard said, and that's part of this human capital point I made about having a good outlook on life, being focused on living your life well, living your family life well. And lives of virtue are lived in the pursuit of happiness. Aristotle, famous Aristotle quote, and of course that's the origin of Thomas Jefferson's famous insertion in the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. It came from Aristotle. He didn't think it up in at Monticello. And that is the key difference. If you don't have that family business, then you're trying to get each of your kids and each of your grandkids into that key part of human capital, which is the pursuit of happiness. And it is a lifelong pursuit, and it has ups and downs, but that is a big part of, in my view, family estate planning. Intellectual capital, talking about people's education. He that has a trade has an estate, another great Poor Richard quote. So again, here, are you trained and have a way to make a livelihood? And if you have a way to make a livelihood, then that is, you're on your way to that pursuit of happiness. And an old young man will be a young old man. And so this is temperance and, and studying and doing your lessons, of course, as you think about education. But that is an important point. And I can remember in high school and college, and I know others here as well can remember this. Remember the person you thought, oh my God, this guy acts 35 years old, and he's 18. And the question is, when he's 65 years old, how's he doing, So poor Richard is suggesting he's probably doing okay. I can think of several examples where that's not true. But I have a friend when I was at Catholic High who was absolutely in this example. He talked in a real deep voice and was just hysterical, and we were just merciless in how much fun we made of him. He was a good student, but he was this old man at age 17 years old. And he talked about how, Elvis consulted with him and stuff. I mean, it was really over the top. Yeah, he was crazy. So right now, in a little teeny town in Pennsylvania, he has convinced the whole town that he is a priest. And he has a church and a website and the whole deal. And he's none of those things. The last time I saw him, I lived in Dallas. Robin will know, I won't mention his name, of course. Robin will know this person. And he was the manager out in Mesquite at the El Chico, was the last time I saw him. So, financial capital, industry perseverance and frugality make a fortune yield. And all the investment advisors in this room that are here and our trust team, steady, investing. This is why we tell people, save early, save often, put a little bit of money away every month. This is the whole concept, because over 60 years, it doesn't make any difference what the government is doing or what the government shutdown is, and it is so hard to get people to do that. So you have an obligation to your kids and grandkids to help get them over that hurdle that they don't, need to go use the Target gift card, that $100 put away will be a big help 40 years down the line due to compound interest. And then the flip side, and we see this with our older clients who've come to us now in retirement, near retirement, in success, be moderate. So recently, because of low interest rates, people have been struggling on their investment plan, that it wasn't quite the income they thought it was going to be. And so again, in success, be moderate, because you don't know what is around the corner. I think this is a very thoughtful list of things. We find that there are people who want to be trustees, but they don't know how to be a trustee. And we have lots of people who want to be beneficiaries. And they really don't understand what that means. And there is work to be done as a beneficiary. It is a job. It is a function. And I hope you'll take these home. I'm not going to go over these. But I thought it was a great list, and we struggle with this list. We've been in litigation over this list. We have been in hang up the telephone cat fights over this list with family members over the last 15 years of doing this. People don't understand their responsibility as a trustee, and they don't understand their responsibility as a beneficiary. If you have a question, we can talk about that. Advisors play a great role at making it easier on trustees and easier on beneficiaries to do their job. They can come in the role of a co-trustee or as a trustee. They can come in the role of just an administrative expert, a bookkeeper who handles the bookkeeping portion of that relationship and maybe the investment management aspect of it in a little neutral forum. The more people involved, the more complex that this gets. But I am a big believer in use of corporate trustees. We're a bank. We sell the service, and if we didn't believe in it, we wouldn't sell the service. I've just seen over and over again that it works very, very effectively, either solo or in combination with a family member. And we're totally ambivalent about that. In many times it works great with a family member because they get to handle the family part, we handle the professional part, and that can be a match made in heaven. You'll see often in documents, though, this concept of a trust protector. It's sort of a common law dictum, but it's really that extra watcher in a trust instrument where the beneficiary doesn't make the trustee change, the trust protector can. So instead of going to court, the beneficiary is unhappy with their bank or unhappy with their brother-in-law or unhappy with their dad or whoever, can petition the trust protector for a change in trustee in a document. And the trust protector has an awesome responsibility now of getting in the middle of what is almost always a family fight. Because if it was just simply, hey, we just don't like the personality of the bank, we'd like to change banks, that's 99% of the time just write me a letter and tell me you'd rather bank somewhere else, and that's the way it goes. So a trust protector is almost always inserted in a document where there is anticipated controversy. We can see down the horizon, and we already have a third party because we have an outside trustee now, but we're going to now have a supernatural trustee up here in the sky to help this. And if you choose to go that way, I do advise you to really sit down and make sure family members know what that role is and how the family is supposed to interact with that, and also if there is a bank trustee involved, the same. So governance in this long-term estate planning type point of view, two comments there. One, family plans, meaning long-term family plans to address the human capital, intellectual capital, and financial capital, sharing those with all generations that are able to have the age, maybe 16 years old and above, to understand that and what you're doing. And family meetings. And people go, boy, I'm feeling a lot of discomfort around a family meeting. It feels a little forced. It feels a little, to me, that's a family personality issue. If you have a family that already has a family business and people gather anyway to go over a dividend policy for the year, or maybe a budget for the year, or they talk about various things of that nature, then having a little family council meeting around that time feels okay. And I don't get a lot of pushback on that. And there are a lot of big multi-generational family businesses. It feels good, really. It's fun. You kind of adjourn the business meeting, and then we start talking about financial aspects of the family, what the cousins are up to, who's doing what can we all do to collectively boost them in their human capital if they've got a drinking problem, their intellectual problem if they're not towing the line, and then finally, are we collectively dealing with the financial planning? If that feels uncomfortable, then my suggestion is if you have a family tradition around a holiday or a wedding tradition or a funeral tradition, then that's a place to bring that family together and talk about the things you love about your family, these longer term family stories, get an update on what everybody's doing, maybe around a big dinner table, but have some formality to it if people are scattered across the country and not all together. That doesn't feel, it feels a little bit more spontaneous, and that can work, particularly if you've got a family leader who's good at that kind of thing. I put down philanthropy because that is another place where families can come together, even if they're scattered. Lots of third generation cousins who are maybe high school and college age, and then everybody else is in their 40s or 50s, and then the older generation is still alive. So that's sort of a typical family structure. Philanthropy is a great way to come together and talk about what's important to the family and share that tradition. And it doesn't have to be monolithic. So just because grandfather is obsessed by Ducks Unlimited, it doesn't mean that his 3 daughters that live in Santa Barbara, have to give money to Ducks Unlimited. It can be you're conveying the point that philanthropy is important to our family. We have a tradition of it, and that you should be involved in it. And that way the different branches can kind of do their own thing, but it's nice to share, well, what are you all involved in and you're part of our family in philanthropy? And it's a way to start that conversation. Likewise, it is interesting, I think, that if there is something that people can get their arms around in a common way, you're able to leverage a family gift to something that means a lot, maybe to the oldest generation, closest to the end of the movie, and you can gather around that and do something together. And that's a neat feeling. But it takes a ringleader. Every family has a ringleader, and it's not necessarily the person at the top. So philanthropy, I always like to say, is a nice way to creep into this discussion of family dialogue, and it addresses all those things. Human capital, character, education, your educational attainment, and financial, because you're, of course, giving money away. Family philanthropy is an estate planning tool. Even at $10 million, $5 million each, still, if you have an estate in excess of that now, inflation adjusted, philanthropy will be part of your plan, where you consider setting up a either single generation charitable remainder trust, a family foundation, or a multi-generational charitable remainder trust. That can be a great way to do it. To keep in mind that it's not all tax driven, though, you also, if you want to have a way to link your family together, can do a family fund at your community foundation. You're paying a high fee to the community foundation, true. You get subpar investment performance unless Delta's involved in it, true. But you don't have to file a Form 990. You can do it with relatively small amounts of money. And it's a way, no matter where they live, all your family members can participate into this Rogers Family Fund. And you can list the things you're interested in giving money away to through that fund, and then the Communities Foundation will do it for you. And a trust department could do that for you as well if you had the family foundation route. And so I think that's a fun way to think about that next generation and the generation following. And finally, under governance is just inter-family loans in the pursuit of happiness. So families frequently support their lower generations with money, and they can do that under the Gifts to Minor Act for people under 18. They can do that through just the normal IRS gifts against the total gift allocation. But also it can come in the form of loans for a house, for a college education, to go to grad school, to move to a new city, to get married. I can come up with a long list of things. And so the idea of a family bank, if you have members in a big family where you've got multi people in each generation, a family bank is a very useful concept, where you go ahead, like the philanthropic discussion, and talk about, well, what are the rules of the road? You know, our family will support what I call the cousins generation, you know, the people under 35. We will support them with a family loan, and here's the characteristics. You got to sign a note. Here's the interest rate. Here's the amortization. It is, if it's to buy something, it's secured by that property. I mean, it looks and feels a bit like a bank, but it is there, you know, and instead of it being kind of whispered about it at Thanksgiving, hey, you know, I've got this chance to, you know, invest in this great opportunity and I need some money, go ahead and communicate to people how do we do that? And I see that as a way to avoid two things. One, the pitfalls of setting it up wrong and having it go really badly. And two, the issue, one brother and sister saying, well, you know, mom always loaned you money and I got nothing, which is an enormous problem in families. Siblings even who get along with each other and everything's fine, it's not transparent, and we have people who are 60 years old who've kept, you know, in their wallet, you know, a note card saying, hey, I remember the time when I was at the university and my mother, you know, you bought a house for him and it was $65,000. So when you die, I want my 65 plus interest off the top. I mean, it's frightening what people will say because they've let it build up over 30 years of animosity over something that was kind of nothing. You know, and probably the maternal or paternal leader at the time either fully anticipated that they would even all that up later, but, you know, never communicated it, never talked about it. So again, I think family banks are another useful governance tool. So, well, I appreciate you coming today, and I wanted to leave you with thoughts of why you need to give careful thought to a estate plan that goes beyond just the money issue, just beyond the tax issue. And I hope this has prompted some thinking on your part, and if we can be of help, don't hesitate to call us. Thank you very much.